Emma Caldwell had spent her Sunday preparing the small joys she knew comforted her: fresh blueberry muffins, warm tea, and the soft hum of her old kitchen clock. But the moment her grandson Daniel stepped through the door, she sensed something was different, something heavy sitting on his shoulders like a quiet shadow he didn't know how to shake. He greeted her with a half-smile that didn't reach his tired eyes, and as he sat across the kitchen table from her, she noticed how he kept staring at the rising steam from his cup, as if the swirling air could help him find the courage to speak. Emma had raised children and watched generations grow, so she recognized that particular silence, the silence of someone holding a truth inside for too long. She tried to keep the atmosphere light, asking about work, about his week, about the cold weather outside, but Daniel only nodded, gave short answers, and kept returning to that same distant look, and with every passing second, the room felt thicker, unlike their usual easy Sunday talks. The winter sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, settling on his face, revealing a sort of softness she hadn't seen in him for years, the softness of someone fighting between fear and honesty. It made her heart ache, not because she feared something bad, but because she could sense he was about to trust her with something deeply personal, something that had been living in him quietly, maybe painfully. She watched as he finally lifted his head, his expression gentle but tense, as if he feared disappointing her, and she felt that instinctive warmth inside, an urge to reassure him before he even spoke. But Daniel's voice came out low, barely above a whisper, and it shook with an emotion she couldn't name yet. "Grandma. I need to tell you something," he said, his fingers lightly tapping the table as though steadying himself. The room, usually filled with familiar comfort, suddenly felt still, as if even the clock had paused to listen. Emma leaned forward without speaking, giving him the quiet space she knew he needed. Daniel drew in a breath, one that trembled at the end, and continued, "It's about someone I shouldn't feel this way about." That sentence alone made Emma's heart skip, not out of fear or judgment, but out of concern about the weight he must have been carrying alone. She didn't rush him, didn't interrupt, didn't fill the silence, because sometimes silence helps a heart open. He looked down again, almost ashamed, and added, "I didn't plan it. I didn't expect it. But it's there, and it's real, and I don't know what to do with it." His voice held such sincerity, such vulnerability, that Emma felt her breath catch. She remembered being young once, remembering the confusion and thrill of feelings that came out of nowhere, memories of her own late husband, the first time he had looked at her in a way that changed her life forever. She wanted to comfort Daniel, but she also sensed he wasn't finished. He lifted his gaze again, and this time his eyes were filled with something deeper: fear, longing, hope, all tangled together. "Grandma," he murmured, "it's about someone older than me, much older." The words hit the air gently but heavily, and Emma's hands went still around her teacup. She didn't react with shock, didn't pull away, she simply listened, her heart softening even more because she understood the courage it took for him to say that. There was no anger in her, no judgment, only a grandmother who saw her grandson hurting, trying to navigate feelings he didn't ask for. She wanted to reach out, to take his hands in hers, to ease the weight she could see pressing on him, but she knew the moment wasn't about her comfort, it was about giving him the space to let out whatever truth he had been holding back for so long. Daniel's confession hung in the quiet kitchen like a delicate thread, fragile, risky, but honest. Emma looked at him with gentle eyes, silently telling him he was safe, he was loved, and he could continue without fear. And in that still moment, in the warm kitchen filled with sunlight, tea steam, and muffled emotions, Emma realized this conversation would shape everything that followed. The words her grandson had just begun to share were only the beginning, and she braced herself with love, knowing part of her life was about to shift in ways she didn't yet understand. His final unfinished whisper, "I think I'm falling for someone I shouldn't," echoed between them, and the moment it left his lips, Emma felt something sharp and tender at the same time, a sense that her quiet Sunday had turned into a turning point neither of them could walk away from unchanged. Emma watched Daniel sit there, his hands fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth, his eyes darting between the steam of his tea and her calm, encouraging gaze, and she knew he was building up the courage to say something he had buried inside for a long time. He took a shaky breath and began to speak, his voice low but steady enough for her to catch every word, and he admitted that he had been thinking about someone in a way that surprised and scared him, someone older, someone he admired deeply, someone who made him feel understood and safe in a way no one else could, and as he spoke, Emma felt the layers of hesitation, longing, and fear spill out like a quiet flood, each word weighted with the intensity of emotions he had kept secret, the kind of emotions that felt both exciting and impossible at the same time, and she could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between wanting to protect his feelings and the desire to speak the truth, and it made her chest tighten with a mix of empathy and love for this young man she had watched grow into someone tender and thoughtful, someone with a heart that felt everything too deeply. Daniel went on to describe her, the woman he couldn't stop thinking about, with words full of admiration, explaining that she was kind, gentle, and patient, the kind of person whose presence brought calm to the chaos in his mind, someone who listened without judgment, who noticed the little things about him that made him feel seen, and Emma could almost feel the warmth of his feelings in the room, the quiet intensity of a heart discovering a connection so rare and fragile that it could be easily broken if mishandled, and yet he was brave enough to speak it aloud, despite knowing it might be complicated, even difficult, and Emma, holding his gaze, felt a rush of emotions she hadn't expected, pride in his honesty, concern for his vulnerability, and a deep understanding of the courage it took to confess feelings that society or circumstance might frown upon, because age and experience often make love seem complicated, even forbidden, and here was Daniel, leaning into that fear with nothing but sincerity and hope. He admitted he hadn't told the woman how he felt, that he had been too scared she would misunderstand him or think he was foolish, and Emma could hear the subtle tremble in his voice, the tension in his shoulders, the almost audible heartbeat that betrayed his calm facade, and she felt compelled to offer guidance, to reassure him that emotions were not wrong, that feelings weren't shameful, and that navigating them with care and respect was part of growing up and loving well. Yet she also knew this moment was not about lecturing. It was about witnessing a young heart in its purest form, raw and unshielded, trusting her enough to speak without holding back. She reached across the table, touching his hand gently, letting him know silently that he was safe, that what he felt mattered, and that there was wisdom in admitting emotions even when they scared him, and he let her touch linger, a small comfort that seemed to settle some of the storm inside him. He spoke about the way this woman made him feel alive, calm, and understood, how her presence alone gave him courage he didn't know he had, how every interaction left him thinking, dreaming, and wondering, how he struggled to keep his emotions contained but found that they had grown too strong to ignore, and Emma listened, her heart swelling at his honesty, imagining the weight of such feelings, the complexity of desire tempered by respect and fear of rejection, the delicate balance between longing and propriety, and she realized how important it was to guide him gently, to help him see that being brave with emotions is different from being reckless, that love can be nurtured slowly and carefully, and that even complicated emotions could be honored without shame. Daniel's voice shook at times as he confessed, and Emma felt the tenderness of that vulnerability, the way it made him human, relatable, and deeply endearing, and she knew that her words here would carry weight, that her response could shape how he approached this connection in the real world, that her guidance could either give him courage or deepen his hesitation, so she chose patience, warmth, and understanding, letting him speak his truth fully. Before offering any advice, she encouraged him with her eyes, with her calm presence, with the gentle squeeze of his hand, letting him feel her belief in him, that love, when sincere and respectful, deserved honesty, and that it was not wrong to hope, to dream, and to take careful steps towards someone who mattered, even if fear whispered doubt. Daniel's eyes glistened with gratitude and relief, the tension slowly leaving his body, replaced by a fragile hope that perhaps his feelings were not impossible, that he had permission from the person he trusted most in his life to acknowledge them, to take his first steps toward honesty. And in that quiet kitchen, Emma and Daniel sat together, surrounded by the smell of muffins and tea, the soft winter light spilling over the table, both understanding that this conversation was not just a confession, it was a turning point, a moment of growth, a first chapter in something delicate and beautiful, and Emma felt her heart echo with both worry and pride, knowing that love was always worth careful attention, that brave honesty mattered more than certainty, and that this Sunday afternoon, with her grandson speaking words he had carried in silence for too long, would remain a memory etched into her heart forever. Emma felt a sudden tension in her chest as Daniel took a deep breath, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. The words he was about to say carrying the weight of a truth that could change everything between them, and she leaned forward slightly, ready to listen, knowing this was more than a typical conversation. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper, almost afraid that speaking louder would make it real too soon, and he finally said the name that made Emma pause, the name that she never expected to hear, Amanda Hayes, the woman who lived next door, the kind, gentle neighbor who often helped Emma with groceries, shared small laughs in the garden, and had always seemed like a friend to the whole family, someone whose presence was calm and nurturing. And now, hearing her name in the context of her grandson's heartfelt confession, Emma's mind raced, connecting pieces she had seen but never realized were part of something deeper, noticing the way Daniel's gaze softened at the thought of her, the way his tone carried admiration and longing, how his words were carefully chosen, respectful, and honest, and how he was expressing emotions that were sincere yet complicated, filled with both fear and hope. He explained that Amanda was someone who made him feel understood, someone who could listen to him without judgment, who noticed him in ways others didn't, and Emma could see how deeply that mattered to him, how rare and precious such a connection felt in a world that often demanded caution and silence, and she felt a mixture of surprise, concern, and tenderness as she processed the situation, realizing that her grandson had found feelings that were both brave and delicate, emotions that could bring happiness or heartbreak depending on how they were handled, and she felt the urgency to guide him wisely while also honoring his honesty and courage. Daniel's words tumbled out with increasing confidence, his heart visible in each sentence, describing the way Amanda's presence brought him comfort, the way her smile lingered in his mind long after she had gone, how the sound of her voice made him feel calm and alive simultaneously, and how he struggled with the idea that these feelings might be inappropriate, yet could not be ignored. And Emma listened, holding his gaze, sensing the sincerity and purity of his emotions, the rare openness of a young heart willing to confront love without hiding, and she felt both protective and proud, knowing this moment could shape his understanding of relationships and connection for years to come. He admitted he had not spoken to Amanda about his feelings because he was afraid she would think he was foolish, that his admiration and longing might be unwelcome, and yet his voice trembled with honesty, revealing that he could not continue pretending, that he could not bury the emotions he felt, and Emma felt a quiet ache in her chest as she realized the weight of unspoken feelings, how heavy they could be on a young soul, and how important it was to respond with care, empathy, and wisdom rather than judgment, allowing him to understand that courage and respect must go hand in hand when navigating matters of the heart. Emma's hands rested lightly on the table, ready to support, to give comfort without taking control, to let him feel safe as he revealed the truth he had carried silently, and she understood that sometimes listening and validating is the most powerful guidance one can give, especially when emotions are raw, sincere, and complicated by circumstance. Daniel spoke of the warmth he felt when he was around Amanda, the sense of being truly seen, the way small gestures, like a smile, a kind word, a shared laugh, had become the highlights of his days, and how the realization that these feelings were more than friendship filled him with both hope and fear, because the intensity of his emotions made the idea of rejection feel unbearable, yet also made the possibility of mutual understanding and connection feel worth the risk, and Emma could see the conflict etched in his face, the struggle between caution and the yearning to be honest, between fear and desire, and she felt a mix of admiration and tenderness for his vulnerability. He admitted that Amanda's kindness, patience, and gentle nature had drawn him in slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, and that over time, what he thought was simple admiration had grown into something deeper, something he could not ignore, and Emma felt the sharp sweetness of recognition, remembering similar moments in her own life when emotions had taken hold unexpectedly, when connection blossomed quietly before it became undeniable, and she realized that Daniel was standing at a threshold, ready to step into something new, delicate, and potentially life-changing. She encouraged him silently with her presence, the slight squeeze of her hand, the soft smile that let him know he was heard, understood, and not alone, that emotions were not to be feared if approached with honesty and care, that love in any form, when genuine, deserved respect and courage, and that the world did not always make such feelings easy, but they were real, valid, and meaningful. And hearing her encouragement, Daniel felt a flicker of hope, a sense that perhaps he could navigate this carefully, that he could honor both his emotions and Amanda's feelings with honesty, sensitivity, and respect. Emma's mind also wandered to Amanda, imagining her gentle ways, her kind gestures, her quiet strength, and she understood why Daniel felt drawn to her, why his heart leaned toward her with admiration and longing, and she felt a wave of empathy for both of them, realizing that the situation was delicate, full of potential, but also that emotions, when genuine and handled with care, could bring profound connection, joy, and understanding. Daniel's voice, though still tinged with nervousness, began to carry a small confidence, the courage born from finally expressing his truth, and Emma felt a warmth in her chest, knowing that honesty, even when frightening, has the power to release a heavy burden, and that this conversation, this Sunday afternoon in the warm kitchen, would be remembered forever by both of them as a turning point, a moment of clarity, growth, and the first step toward discovering whether feelings could transform into something real, tender, and enduring. And as the winter light spilled over the table, highlighting the sincerity in his eyes, Emma silently promised herself that she would guide, support, and love him through whatever came next, knowing that listening, understanding, and gentle encouragement could shape the path of a young heart in profound ways, and that the quiet confession of feelings could echo far beyond the kitchen, leaving an imprint on their lives that neither would ever forget. Emma felt the quiet weight of the moment settle over the kitchen as Daniel looked at her with a mixture of hope, fear, and vulnerability that made her heart ache with tenderness, and she realized that this conversation was not just about feelings, it was about growth, honesty, and trust, because he had chosen to share something deeply personal with her, something that could have made him afraid of judgment, and she understood that this was a turning point for both of them, a moment that would shape the way he approached love and connection in the future. So she reached out, her hands resting lightly on his, letting him feel her support and steady presence, her silence speaking volumes about acceptance and understanding, and Daniel's eyes reflected a fragile relief, the first breath of courage that comes after revealing a secret that has lived too long in shadows, and he spoke again, asking quietly if he should tell Amanda how he felt or bury the emotions inside, fearing that his honesty could disrupt the delicate balance of their relationship, and Emma listened carefully, choosing her words with care, reminding him that honesty is never simple, but it is necessary for meaningful connection, that bravery does not mean rushing, but facing emotions with respect and thoughtfulness, that love, when genuine, deserves recognition even when it comes with risk, and that the courage to be vulnerable is one of the strongest gifts a person can give themselves and others. And as she spoke, Daniel's posture relaxed slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing, the uncertainty in his eyes softening as he felt her belief in him, and she continued, encouraging him to act gently, to honor Amanda's feelings while acknowledging his own, to be patient yet sincere, to listen as carefully as he speaks, and to approach the situation with the respect that makes a connection lasting and true. And in that moment, Emma reflected on her own past, remembering the love she had shared with her late husband, the patience, understanding, and trust that had built their bond over decades, and she realized that what she had taught Daniel by living her life, the power of honesty, kindness, and steady love, was exactly what he needed now, that her example had quietly prepared him for this delicate challenge, and that the lessons of heart she had imparted could guide him as he navigated this first complex, tender love. And Daniel listened, absorbing her words, feeling the warmth of her experience blend with the excitement of his own emotions, understanding that love is a careful balance of courage, patience, and authenticity, and that feeling deeply is not a mistake but a gift that shapes who we become. And as he processed her guidance, he felt a spark of hope, a sense that perhaps Amanda could feel the same way, that the connection he had noticed, admired, and cherished could blossom if approached with honesty, gentleness, and respect. And he realized that confessing feelings is not just about words, but about the courage to show one's heart while remaining aware of the other's emotions. And Emma could see the shift in him, the way he straightened slightly, the way his eyes brightened, the way a small smile emerged, a smile of tentative confidence born from being heard, understood, and validated, and she felt a deep pride mixed with tenderness, knowing that he had taken the first step toward navigating love responsibly, bravely, and sincerely, and that no matter what the future held, he would always remember this afternoon, this quiet moment at the kitchen table, as the time when he learned to trust himself, to honor his heart, and to embrace the possibility of connection with honesty, care, and courage. And she felt the echo of his words linger in the room long after he left, the weight of his feelings and the sincerity of his confession leaving a lasting warmth, a gentle reminder of the beauty and fragility of human emotion, the significance of vulnerability, and the enduring power of love spoken and received with respect and truth. And as Daniel's footsteps faded down the path, Emma sat alone for a moment, the winter sun casting long shadows across the kitchen floor, and she whispered softly to herself, reflecting on how rare it is to witness a young heart in such an honest, tender, and courageous state, and how meaningful it is to offer guidance without judgment, to support without controlling, to love without conditions, and she felt a quiet joy in knowing that her presence, her listening, and her belief in him had given him the courage to face his emotions and the possibility of a future filled with genuine connection. And in that stillness, she realized that these words, spoken at her kitchen table, would echo in her heart forever, reminding her of the trust, love, and growth shared across generations, the delicate beauty of honesty, and the timeless, unspoken bond between a grandmother and her grandson as he stepped into the world of feelings he had long held in silence, carrying both her guidance and his hope into what lay ahead.